I've built an empire from nothing, starting as a hotel maid. But my own daughter and her husband looked down on my work and my employees. They thought they could humiliate me in my own hotel lobby, not knowing I was the owner. Now they will learn that a queen doesn't forget where she came from, and she never tolerates disrespect. At 58 years old, I've learned that true power isn't just about the money in your bank account or the properties you own, though I have plenty of both. True power is knowing exactly who you are and never apologizing for it. Looking at myself in the mirror of my penthouse apartment overlooking Manhattan, I see a woman who has weathered every storm life threw at her and emerged victorious. My platinum blonde hair falls in perfect waves past my shoulders. My skin is still smooth, thanks to good genetics and excellent skincare. And my green eyes hold the kind of steel that comes from building an empire from nothing. But I wasn't always this woman. 35 years ago, I was a 19-year-old girl named Ilara O'Sullivan scrubbing toilets at the Grand View Hotel in Boston for minimum wage. My hands were raw, my back ached constantly, and I went home to a studio apartment that barely had heat. But even then, I was watching, learning, studying every detail of how that hotel operated. The guests would walk past me like I was invisible, which suited me just fine. I heard their complaints about everything. The thread count of the sheets, the water pressure in the showers, the temperature of their morning coffee. I memorized every detail because I knew that someday I would own a place like this. And when I did, it would be perfect. It took me 15 years of saving every penny, working 3 jobs, and studying business at night school. But I finally bought my first property, a rundown bed and breakfast in Vermont. 5 years later, I owned 3 boutique hotels. 10 years after that, I had a chain of luxury resorts across New England. Today, Sterling Luxury Hotels spans 12 countries with 48 properties and employs over 15,000 people. But success comes with a price, and mine was paid in loneliness and sacrifice. My marriage to Robert Sterling, a kind man who gave me his name and believed in my dreams, ended when he couldn't handle my ambition. "You love those hotels more than you love me," he said during our divorce. He wasn't wrong, but I never apologized for it. Our daughter Isabel was 8 when we divorced. I threw myself into building my empire, telling myself I was doing it for her, creating a legacy, ensuring she'd never have to scrub anyone's toilets. But children need their mother present, not just providing. And I failed her in ways I'm still paying for today. Isabel grew up beautiful, entitled, and resentful. She had every advantage: private schools, designer clothes, trust funds. But what she didn't have was respect for the work that provided those luxuries. To her, I was just the mother who was never home, who chose business meetings over ballet recitals, who built walls instead of relationships. 3 years ago at 25, she married Leo Morgan, a 32-year-old investment banker who seemed to view our family's wealth as his personal ATM. From the moment I met him, I knew he was trouble. He had that particular kind of arrogance that comes from men who've never been told no, who believe their mediocre talents and family connections entitle them to everything they desire. "Your mother's quite the businesswoman," he'd said at their engagement party, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Must have been tough. Working your way up. From what was it? Housekeeping." The way he said it made my accomplishments sound like something shameful. But I smiled politely, kissed his cheek, and said nothing. I was still hoping then that I could find a way to love this man my daughter had chosen. I was wrong. The signs were there from the beginning. The way he spoke to waiters, demanding they bring him something decent to drink. How he'd snap his fingers at hotel staff, treating them like servants rather than professionals. The cruel nickname he had for our longtime housekeeper, Sophia, the help. He said it with just enough contempt to make it clear he considered her beneath notice. Isabel not only tolerated this behavior, she encouraged it. She'd laugh when he insulted a valet, or when he complained loudly about service that wasn't fast enough, perfect enough, or expensive enough. My daughter, who had been raised with every privilege, had learned to look down on the very people who made her comfortable life possible. It broke my heart, but I held my tongue. I told myself that maybe marriage would mature her, that she'd grow out of this phase. I even convinced myself that my own absence during her childhood had somehow contributed to this attitude, and that I owed it to her to stay silent. But silence, I've learned, is often mistaken for weakness. And Leo Morgan was about to discover that I am many things: ruthless, calculating, unforgiving when crossed, but weak has never been one of them. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning in March. I was in my corner office on the 42nd floor reviewing reports for a chain of hotels in California when Isabel's name appeared on my screen. "Mother," she said without preamble, "Leo thinks we should take a family vacation, somewhere tropical, to bond." The word bond came out like she was tasting something unpleasant. A family vacation. Yes, Leo suggested that resort you just bought in Florida, the one in Key West. He says it's supposed to be nice. Her tone suggested she doubted this assessment. The Sunset Bay Resort. I'd acquired it 6 months earlier from a family that had owned it for 3 generations, but couldn't compete with the big chains. It was a gem, 97 rooms of old Florida charm with modern luxury, pristine beaches, and the kind of service that made guests feel like they were the only people on earth who mattered. "When were you thinking?" I asked, already knowing I would agree. Despite everything, Isabel was my daughter. If she was reaching out, even at her husband's suggestion, I would take it. Next weekend. Leo has some business meetings in Miami afterward, so it works out perfectly. Of course it did. I should have seen it then. The real reason for this sudden desire for family time. But hope makes us blind to warning signs we would otherwise spot from miles away. "I'll arrange everything," I told her. "The penthouse suite is lovely this time of year." "Actually," Isabel said quickly, "we prefer to book our own accommodations. You know how Leo is about independence." Independence. As if accepting my hospitality would somehow hurt his masculine pride. But I agreed because I wanted this to work. "Of course, darling. I'll just book myself a regular room. We can meet for dinner on Friday night." "Perfect," she said, and for a moment, she sounded almost pleased. "This will be good, Mother. Really good." After I hung up, I sat in my office for a long time, looking out at the city I'd conquered. Somewhere below, people were checking into my hotels, eating in my restaurants, celebrating anniversaries, and closing business deals in spaces I'd created. My empire stretched across continents, employed thousands, and generated millions in revenue every year. But none of that mattered as much as the hope that maybe, finally, I could repair the relationship with the only family I had left. I should have known better. After all, I built my fortune on reading people, on understanding their motivations, and predicting their actions. The signs were all there, glaring as neon lights, but I chose to ignore them because I wanted so desperately to believe that my daughter still loved me. By Friday evening, I would learn the truth about what Isabel and Leo really thought of me. And they would learn something, too. Something that would change all our lives forever. They would learn that Lara Sterling didn't become a queen by accident. And queens don't forgive betrayal. They would learn that you should never, ever underestimate a woman who built her empire one room at a time. And most importantly, they would learn that some mistakes can't be undone, no matter how much you regret them afterward. The flight to Key West on my private jet should have been peaceful. Instead, I spent the entire flight second-guessing my decision to travel separately from Isabel and Leo. They wanted to fly commercial. I told myself, Leo probably thinks it's more authentic than taking the family plane. But even as I tried to make sense of their choice, something felt off. In all the years since her marriage, Isabel had never turned down luxury when it was offered freely. I tried to focus on work, reviewing the latest customer satisfaction reports from the Sunset Bay Resort. Everything looked perfect on paper, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap. The plane touched down at Key West International at 3:47 p.m. on Friday. Instead of taking my usual car service, I called a simple taxi. If I was going to spend the weekend reconnecting with my daughter, I wanted to start as just another guest, not as the owner. It was a decision that would prove more revealing than I could have imagined. The drive to the resort took 25 minutes. The taxi driver, Javier, kept up a steady conversation about the weather and his granddaughter's party next month. "You staying at the Sunset Bay?" he asked. "My sister Catalina works in housekeeping there. She says the owner, some fancy lady from New York, actually treats the staff like human beings. Rare thing these days." "Is it?" I asked. "Oh, hell yes," Javier said. "Most of these resort owners, they don't give a damn about nobody. But this sterling woman, Catalina, says she pays good wages, gives real benefits, even sent flowers when Catalina's husband died last year." I felt a warmth spread through my chest. Those weren't grand gestures to me. They were simply the right things to do. But hearing that my efforts were noticed and appreciated by people like Catalina made every late night and difficult decision worth it. "Sounds like a good boss," I said. "The best." Javier nodded. "Catalina's worked hotels for 30 years, and she says she ain't never had an owner who remembers her name, let alone sends her Christmas bonuses big enough to pay for her kids' school supplies." We pulled into the resort, and I felt a familiar surge of pride. The building was a masterpiece of old Florida architecture, and the sound of steel drums drifted from the poolside bar. But more than the beauty of the place, what made me proud was the atmosphere. Guests moved through the lobby with relaxed smiles. Staff members genuinely seemed happy to be there. I paid Javier, adding a generous tip. "And if you see that sterling woman, tell her Javier from Island Taxi says, 'Thanks for taking care of people like my Catalina.' I'll be sure to pass that along." I promised. The lobby was bustling. I joined the line behind a family from Ohio and used the time to observe my staff. The front desk manager, Olivia, was handling a complicated reservation change with grace and patience. One of the newer clerks was explaining the resort's amenities to an elderly couple with genuine enthusiasm. Everything looked perfect. So why did I have this growing sense of unease? "Next guest, please," called Olivia, and I stepped forward. "I have a reservation under Sterling." Olivia's professional smile brightened when she saw my name. "Miss Sterling, welcome back to Sunset Bay." She leaned forward. "Mr. Hahn wanted me to let him know the moment you arrived. Should I call him?" "No need," I said quietly. "I'm here for a family weekend. I prefer to keep things unofficial." As Olivia processed my check-in, I noticed a commotion near the elevator. A man's voice, raised and demanding, cut through the lobby's noise. "What do you mean, the suite isn't ready? We had reservations. You know who I am?" I turned and felt my heart sink. Leo Morgan stood near the concierge desk, his face flushed with anger, pointing an accusatory finger at a young staff member named Sophia. Isabel stood beside him, not intervening, just checking her phone, with bored annoyance. "Sir, I apologize," Sophia was saying. "Your suite will be ready in about 30 minutes. We'd be happy to comp your drinks at the poolside bar while you wait." 30 minutes. Leo's voice got louder. "I didn't fly down here to wait around because your housekeeping staff can't do their jobs. This is ridiculous." Other guests were starting to stare. The professional atmosphere was rapidly deteriorating into a public spectacle. I should have intervened immediately, but something held me back. A growing realization that this scene was showing me something important about the man my daughter had married. "Leo, just let them get us drinks," Isabel said. "It's not a big deal." "It is a big deal," Leo snapped. "I'm paying premium prices for premium service, not to be jerked around by incompetent staff." Sophia's hands trembled as she tried to maintain her smile. "Sir, I truly apologize. Let me speak with my manager." "Yes, get your manager," Leo demanded. "Get someone who can actually do something instead of making excuses." That's when I saw Olivia start to move from behind the front desk, but I caught her eye and shook my head slightly. I wanted to see how this played out, to understand exactly who my son-in-law really was when he thought no one important was watching. What I saw made my blood run cold. Leo stepped closer to Sophia, using his height to intimidate her. "I work 60-hour weeks to afford places like this. I don't come on vacation to deal with incompetence from people whose only job is to make my stay pleasant. So either you fix this problem right now, or I'm going to make sure your manager knows exactly how poorly you represent this establishment." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she held her ground. I understand your frustration. Sir, let me call my supervisor. You do that, Leo said. Then, loud enough for half the lobby to hear, he added, Unbelievable. They hire these people to work at luxury resorts, and they can't even manage basic customer service. What's the point of paying resort prices if you're going to get motel-quality staff? The lobby had gone almost completely quiet. Every guest was watching now, but Isabel, my daughter, whom I had raised to be better than this, just stood there scrolling through her phone like nothing was happening. That's when I understood that this weekend was going to be a reckoning, because in that moment, watching my son-in-law humiliate my employee while my daughter looked on with indifference, I finally saw them both clearly, and what I saw was going to change everything. Saturday morning was perfect Key West weather. I stood on my 7th-floor balcony, sipping coffee, and watching the resort come to life. I'd spent most of the previous evening on the phone with Mr. Hahn, getting the full story of Leo and Isabel's arrival. The scene I'd witnessed was just the beginning. He complained about everything Mr. Hahn had told me. And Isabel, he said, when housekeeping brought extra towels, she looked at the housekeeper like she was something unpleasant she'd stepped in. Very dismissive. I'd thanked Mr. Hahn and hung up, feeling like I was mourning the daughter I thought I'd raised. Somewhere between private schools and trust funds, I'd failed to teach her the most important lesson of all, that every person deserves respect, regardless of their job. Now dressed in a white linen pantsuit, I prepared to face them both over breakfast. I spotted them immediately at a corner table with an ocean view. Leo was at the buffet, piling scrambled eggs and bacon onto his plate, while gesturing impatiently at the chef. Isabel sat at their table, looking stunning in a sundress and the diamond earrings I'd given her for her last birthday. Mother, she said, standing to give me an air kiss. You look lovely. As do you, darling, I replied. Well, mostly, Leo said, cutting into his omelet. Though, I have to say, the service could use some improvement. The staff here seems a little undertrained. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect, I said quietly, regardless of their job. Of course, Leo said, as if explaining something to a child. But respect has to be earned, and when you're paying premium prices, you expect premium service. That's very idealistic, Isabel said, but in the real world, people need clear boundaries. They need to understand their place. I was saved from responding by the arrival of our server, a young man named Julian. Good morning, ladies, Julian said with genuine warmth. Can I get you started with some coffee or juice? Coffee, please, I said, smiling at him. Yeah, coffee. And make sure it's hot this time, Leo said. Julian's smile faltered, but he nodded. I'll make sure you get a fresh pot, sir. As Julian walked away, Leo shook his head. See what I mean? I shouldn't have to tell him to bring hot coffee. That should be automatic. I watched Julian preparing our drinks. When he returned, he served each cup with a warm smile, even managing to maintain his professionalism despite Leo's obvious disdain. Is there anything else I can bring you ladies this morning? Julian asked. I'm fine, thank you, I said. Actually, Leo interrupted. I ordered Eggs Benedict 20 minutes ago. Where is it? Julian looked confused. Sir, I don't show an order for Eggs Benedict on my... I ordered it from the girl at the buffet, Leo said impatiently. I knew immediately what had happened. The girl at the buffet was Sarah, one of our breakfast servers. She would have directed Leo to place his order through his table server. Julian didn't point out Leo's mistake. Instead, he said, Let me check with the kitchen right away, sir. I'll have that out to you as quickly as possible. As Julian hurried away, I felt a cold, hard certainty that this weekend was going to end very differently than any of us had planned. But I had no idea just how public that ending would be. After breakfast, I excused myself to make some business calls. I spent the morning in my room, but my mind kept drifting to the conversation at breakfast. Around 2 o'clock, I decided to take a walk. I wanted to see more of how Leo and Isabel interacted with my staff when they thought no one important was watching. I found them at the pool in prime loungers under a canvas cabana. Isabel was reading a magazine, while Leo worked on business emails. A pool attendant, Miguel, approached them with fresh towels and ice water. "Excuse me," Miguel said politely. "Would you like me to refresh your towels?" Leo looked up from his phone with obvious annoyance. "Finally, I flagged down someone 10 minutes ago asking for fresh drinks. Where are they?" "Sir, I'm the towel attendant. For drinks, you would need to speak with—" "I don't care what your official job is." Leo cut him off. "I'm a guest at this resort, and I asked for service. Either get me what I asked for, or find someone who can—" "Of course, sir," Miguel said quickly. "What can I bring you?" "2 margaritas, top-shelf tequila, and make sure they're strong." Miguel hurried away toward the bar. When he returned with the drinks, Leo took a sip and made a face. "This is what you call top shelf. Taste this," he said to Isabel. "It's fine, Leo." "It's not fine," Leo said loudly. "Hey," he called to Miguel, "these drinks are weak. Make them again. And this time, actually put some alcohol in them." Miguel's face flushed, but he nodded. "Right away, sir." As Miguel walked away, I heard a woman at a nearby table whisper to her husband, "What a jerk. Those drinks looked perfectly fine to me." But Leo wasn't done. When Miguel returned, Leo made a big show of tasting the remade drinks before nodding. "Better," he said, "but next time, don't make me ask twice." "Yes, sir," Miguel said quietly. "Is there anything else I can bring you?" "Not from you," Leo said dismissively. I felt sick watching it. And through it all, Isabel said nothing. I was still processing what I'd witnessed when I saw them heading toward the lobby around 4 o'clock, their arms full of shopping bags. I followed at a distance. What I saw in the lobby that afternoon would change all of our lives forever. The lobby of the Sunset Bay Resort was busier than usual for a Saturday afternoon. A wedding party was checking in. Their excitement filled the space with laughter. I positioned myself in one of the seating areas. I had a clear view of the front desk where Olivia was managing the chaos. Leo and Isabel approached the desk, carrying several shopping bags. "We need someone to take these bags up to our room," Leo said, "and I want to confirm our late checkout tomorrow. We don't want to be rushed." "Of course," Olivia said. "I'll have a bellhop bring your purchases up. You're set for 2 p.m. tomorrow, correct?" "Make it 3 p.m., Leo said. "We might want to use the pool in the morning." "I'll make that adjustment," Olivia said. "Is there anything else I can help you with?" That's when I saw myself approaching the front desk. I had been so focused on watching Leo and Isabel that I hadn't noticed my own approach. I was carrying my laptop bag and a small overnight case. I had decided to move to a different room, wanting some distance from the toxicity. I joined the line behind an elderly gentleman. As he finished, I stepped forward. Olivia saw me immediately, but before she could speak, Leo turned around and nearly collided with me. "Excuse me," I said politely. Leo looked me up and down. His expression shifted to something much uglier. Well, he said loudly. "Look who it is." Isabel turned to see what had caught her husband's attention. When she saw me, her face broke into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Mother, what a coincidence." But Leo wasn't done. He looked at Olivia, who was standing behind the counter, looking increasingly uncomfortable, and then back at me. "You know what? Don't bother helping her," he said, his voice getting louder. "She's just a maid. Let her carry her own bags." The words hit the lobby like a physical blow. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. The elegant atmosphere of the lobby suddenly felt charged with tension. "Leo," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. "What did you just say?" But Leo was on a roll now. He turned to address Olivia directly, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. I said, "Don't help her with the bags. She's just a maid." He gestured at me dismissively. "Probably here cleaning rooms or something. Let her handle her own luggage. That's what they're paid for." "Right." The silence that followed was deafening. I could feel dozens of eyes on us. This wasn't just a private family humiliation. This was a very public spectacle. And then Isabel, my daughter, my only child, The little girl I had worked 18-hour days to provide for burst out laughing. It wasn't a nervous laugh. It was genuine amusement. "Oh, my God, Leo," she said between giggles. "You're terrible, but you're not wrong. She does look like she belongs downstairs with the cleaning supplies, doesn't she?" The lobby had gone completely silent now. The elderly businessman who had been in line behind us stepped closer. "Excuse me," he said to Leo, "that's completely inappropriate. You owe this lady an apology." But Leo turned on him with a sneer. "Mind your own business, old man." A woman in her 50s said, "Actually, it concerns all of us. We're all witnessing you humiliate another human being for no reason." More voices joined in, but Leo seemed to feed off the attention. He puffed up his chest and addressed the growing crowd. "Look, I have every right to expect that the staff knows their place and the guests are treated with appropriate respect. This woman," he pointed at me, "clearly doesn't belong in the same line as paying customers." That's when I felt something inside me snap. Not break, snap. I had built my empire on patience and strategy. But standing there in the lobby of my own hotel, listening to my daughter laugh at her husband's cruelty, I abandoned strategy altogether. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small plastic card. I walked calmly to the front desk, where Olivia was still standing frozen, and placed the card on the marble counter. "Olivia," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the silent lobby, "would you mind scanning this for me?" Olivia looked down at the card, and I watched as recognition dawned in her eyes. "Miss Sterling," she whispered. "Please," I said calmly, "scan the card." With trembling hands, Olivia picked up the card and ran it through the reader. The computer screen changed, displaying information that made her eyes widen further. "What's going on?" Leo demanded, his voice less certain now. "What is that card?" I turned to face him, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. "This card," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "identifies me as the owner of this resort, and of the other 47 properties in the Sterling Luxury Hotels chain." The silence that followed was the stunned silence of people watching a bomb go off. Leo's face cycled through several colors, red to white to an interesting shade of green. Isabel had stopped laughing, her mouth hanging open in shock. "You're lying," Leo said, but his voice cracked. I turned back to Olivia. "Olivia," I said pleasantly, "could you please read aloud what it says on your screen?" Olivia cleared her throat, her voice barely above a whisper. It says Ilara Sterling, owner and CEO, Sterling Luxury Hotels. Access level unlimited. Special instructions. Notify general manager immediately upon arrival." A murmur ran through the crowd. I walked closer to Leo, who was backing away from the front desk. "You called me a maid," I said, "and you know what? You're absolutely right. I was a maid." I continued, stepping closer. "I started as a 19-year-old girl, cleaning toilets and scrubbing floors. But you know what I learned? I learned that every job has dignity. I learned that the people who clean your rooms and serve your food are human beings who deserve respect. And I learned that the measure of a person isn't what they do for a living. It's how they treat other people." I turned to Olivia. "Olivia, please cancel Mr. and Mrs. Morgan's reservation. Effective immediately." "Wait," Leo sputtered. "You can't." "I can, and I am," I said, cutting him off. "You see, as the owner of this establishment, I have the right to refuse service to anyone who treats my staff with disrespect." Isabel stepped forward, her face pale. "Mother, please. We can talk about this." "We could have talked about it," I said, turning to face my daughter. "We could have talked about it at breakfast when you laughed about making a staff member cry. We could have talked about it at the pool when you sat silently while your husband insulted a young man just trying to do his job. But we didn't talk about it. Instead, you came to my hotel, humiliated my employees, and then stood in my lobby and laughed while your husband called me a maid like it was the most insulting thing he could think of." Tears were starting to form in Isabel's eyes, but I felt no sympathy. The irony, of course, is that being called a maid isn't an insult. Maids work hard, take pride in their jobs, and contribute something valuable to the world. unlike entitled parasites who think their trust funds make them better than everyone else. I could see Mr. Hahn pushing through the crowd, probably alerted by Olivia's scan of my card. "Mr. Hahn," I called to him, "please have security escort Mr. and Mrs. Morgan from the premises immediately. Their belongings should be packed and waiting for them at the front entrance." "Yes, ma'am," Mr. Hahn said. "This is insane," Leo said, his voice rising. "You can't throw paying guests out of a hotel because of a misunderstanding." "This wasn't a misunderstanding," I said. "This was a choice. You chose to humiliate people who couldn't defend themselves. You chose to treat my staff like they were subhuman. You chose to turn my lobby into a circus for your own amusement. Every choice has consequences," I continued, "and here are yours." The security guards were calm, courteous, but serious. One of them, Michael, spoke first. "Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, we're going to need you to come with us." Leo's face had gone several colors and finally settled on an alarming shade of purple. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered. "I'm not going anywhere." "Sir," Michael said patiently, "you are speaking to management. Miss Sterling is the owner of this property. I don't care if she's the Queen of England." Leo shot back. "This is America. You can't just throw people out of a hotel because you don't like them." I stepped forward, my voice cutting through his protests like ice. "Actually, I can. This is private property. And as the owner, I have the right to refuse service to anyone who creates a disturbance, harasses my staff, or makes other guests uncomfortable. You've managed to do all three in the span of 10 minutes. The crowd around us had swelled. I could see phones everywhere, recording every word. Isabel grabbed my arm. "Mother, please. People are filming this. Think about your reputation, the business." "My reputation is built on treating people with dignity and respect. Your husband just destroyed any chance I had of maintaining that reputation by making a scene that will be talked about for months. The only question now is whether people remember me as the owner who allowed her family to abuse her staff, or as the owner who stood up for her employees when it mattered. You're upset, but please think about this rationally. Leo was he was trying to be funny. He didn't mean anything by it." I stared at my daughter and felt something die inside me that I hadn't even realized was still alive. He publicly humiliated me, called me names, instructed my staff not to serve me. And you think he didn't mean anything by it? You're overreacting. Am I? I turned to address the crowd. How many of you recorded what happened here? How many of you have video of my son-in-law calling me a maid and telling the staff not to serve me? Dozens of hands went up. And how many of you think that behavior was acceptable, that it was just a man being funny or showing off? Not a single hand stayed raised. The silence was damning. I turned back to Isabel. "There's your answer." The housekeeping staff emerged with luggage carts. "Their belongings are ready," Mr. Hahn said. "Everything has been carefully packed and accounted for." "Excellent," I said. "Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, your things are here. Michael will escort you to the front entrance where you can verify that everything is present and accounted for." Leo looked like he was about to have a stroke. "This is kidnapping. I'm calling the police." "Please do," I said pleasantly. "I'll be happy to explain to them how you disrupted my business, harassed my employees, and created a public disturbance. I have about 50 witnesses and multiple video recordings to support my case." Michael stepped forward. "Sir, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, but you are leaving this property now." For a moment, I thought Leo might try to fight. But even in his rage, he wasn't completely stupid. "Fine," he snarled. "But this isn't over. I'll sue you for everything you've got." I smiled at Leo with a cold pleasantness. "Mr. Morgan," I said, "I own 48 hotels in 12 countries. My net worth is approximately $800 million. I employ over 15,000 people, and my annual revenue exceeds $2 billion. You, on the other hand, are a mid-level investment banker whose biggest achievement is marrying into money. If you want to go to war with me, please understand that you're bringing a water pistol to a nuclear fight." The lobby erupted in applause. Leo's face went white, then red, then white again. Come on, Isabel, he muttered, grabbing her arm. We're leaving. But Isabel pulled away from him. Instead, she looked at me with pure venom in her eyes. You think you're so superior, she hissed, but all the money in the world can't change what you really are. You're still just a maid from Boston who got lucky, and everyone sees right through you. You're right, I said, my voice steady despite the pain in my chest. I am still a maid from Boston. I'm still the woman who cleaned toilets and scrubbed floors and learned that honest work has dignity. I'm still the woman who built something from nothing, who created jobs for thousands of people, who turned that maid's work ethic into an empire. I stepped closer to her. The difference between us, Isabel, is that I remember where I came from. I remember what it's like to be dismissed, to be treated as invisible. And instead of becoming someone who treats others that way, I became someone who makes sure it never happens to anyone in my employ. The applause started again, louder this time. Isabel's composure finally cracked. Tears streamed down her face, but they were tears of rage, not remorse. I hate you, she screamed. You ruined my childhood with your obsession with these stupid hotels. And now you're ruining my marriage because you can't stand to see me happy. I'm not ruining your marriage, Isabel, I said quietly. Your husband's behavior is doing that all by itself. The question is whether you're going to enable it or recognize it for what it is. He's a good man, she sobbed. He just doesn't understand how to deal with people like... She gestured vaguely at the staff. People like what? I asked. People who work for a living? People who serve others? People who take pride in honest labor? Isabel didn't answer. Her silence said everything. Michael cleared his throat. Ma'am, we really need to move this along. The front entrance is getting crowded. I nodded. The show was over. Of course, I said. Please escort Mr. and Mrs. Morgan to the front entrance. Make sure they have all their belongings, and then see them safely off the property. As the security guards moved to flank Leo and Isabel, I added one final instruction. Oh, and Michael, Mr. and Mrs. Morgan are permanently banned from all Sterling luxury properties worldwide. Please make sure that information is added to our system immediately. Leo spun around one last time. You crazy? You'll regret this. The only thing I regret, I said, is that it took me this long to see who you both really are. As they were escorted toward the exit, the crowd began to disperse. I was watching my daughter walk out of my life, probably forever, and feeling a mix of grief and relief. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. And sometimes that's exactly as it should be. The front entrance of the resort became a stage for the final act of Leo and Isabel's humiliation. Word had spread quickly. Guests who hadn't witnessed the lobby confrontation were now gathering on balconies to watch. It was like a reality show. Michael and his partner flanked Leo and Isabel as they emerged. Behind them, Sophia and two other housekeeping staff wheeled out carts loaded with their belongings. I watched from the lobby windows. Mr. Hahn stood beside me. Ma'am, he said quietly, the local news station has been calling. Apparently, someone sent them video from the lobby. I wasn't surprised. What did you tell them? I asked that we don't comment on the private matters of our guests, but they're asking if they can come out for an interview. I considered this. The story was going to break whether I participated or not. Schedule something for later this evening. I decided. Through the window, I watched Leo inspect the luggage carts. He was clearly looking for a reason to complain, but Sophia had done her job perfectly. Every item was carefully packed. Isabel stood apart from her husband, her arms wrapped around herself. She looked lost. For a moment, seeing her like that, I felt a tug of maternal instinct. Then I remembered the sound of her laughter. A yellow cab had pulled up. It was Javier, the same driver who had brought me to the resort yesterday. This isn't going to work, I heard Leo say, his voice carrying clearly. We have too much stuff for this piece of junk. Javier was trying to fit their luggage into his taxi. Sir, I can make it work. I don't want you to make it work, Leo snapped. I want a proper car, a real car, not this taxi cab nonsense. The humiliation of being ejected was transforming into anger at everyone around him, and Javier had become a convenient target. Do you know how much money I spent at this resort? Leo demanded. I should be leaving in a limo, not cramming into some beat-up taxi. Javier continued packing, his movements careful and professional. I care about getting what I paid for, Leo said. And what I paid for was luxury service, not a ride in some immigrant's piece of taxi. The words hit the portico like a physical blow. But it was Javier's reaction that broke my heart. The proud, friendly man's shoulders sagged. His face crumpled slightly before he forced it back into professional neutrality. Yes, sir, Javier said quietly. I understand. That's when I stopped being a hotel owner and became once again the 19-year-old maid who had been treated like dirt for the crime of working for a living. I walked out of the lobby and across the portico. The crowd of onlookers sensed the drama wasn't over. Phones came out again. All attention focused on me. Javier, I called out. He looked up, recognizing me immediately. Oh, hello again, lady. Didn't expect to see you so soon. I didn't expect to see you either, I said, but I'm very glad you're here. Leo, who had been mid-rant, fell silent. Mr. Morgan, I said pleasantly, I couldn't help but overhear your conversation with Javier here. You seem to have some concerns about his taxi. You were just expressing your opinion about immigrant workers and their piece of junk taxis, I said, in front of my hotel, to a man whose sister has worked for me for 15 years. The silence was deafening. Javier, I said, you don't have to take these passengers. If you don't want to, I can call another taxi for them. Javier looked at me, then at Leo, then back at me. Ma'am, Javier said, finally, I'll take them. It's my job. It is your job, I agreed. But it's not your job to be insulted while you do it. I reached into my wallet and pulled out 5 $100 bills. This is for the excellent service you provided when you drove me here yesterday, and for the excellent service I know you'll provide to Mr. and Mrs. Morgan today, despite their attitude. Javier stared at the money. Ma'am, this is too much. The fare is whatever I say it is, I interrupted gently. And I say exceptional service deserves exceptional compensation. I turned to address the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, I want you to meet Javier. He's been driving a taxi in Key West for over 20 years. He supports his family through honest work. His sister Catalina has been one of my finest employees for 15 years. These are the people that Mr. Morgan just called inferior because of their immigration status and their choice of profession. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. That's disgusting. What's wrong with people? Javier was still staring at the money, but now tears were forming in his eyes. Ma'am, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You don't know what this means. My granddaughter's party is next month, and we've been trying to save up for her dress. Then I hope she finds the perfect one, I said, squeezing his shoulder. That's when the skies opened up. A sudden Florida thunderstorm erupted, sending everyone scrambling for cover. Everyone except Leo and Isabel, who were caught in the open portico with their luggage scattered around Javier's taxi. They had nowhere to go except into his car. Come on, Leo shouted over the sound of the rain. We need to get out of here. Javier, professional to the end, helped them load the remaining luggage. Within minutes, they were all crammed into the taxi. Through the rain-streaked windows, I could see Leo's face, red with anger and humiliation. Isabel sat in the back seat, her designer dress rumpled, looking like she might cry. As the taxi sputtered and pulled away, I stood under the portico, completely dry, watching their tail lights disappear into the rain. Ma'am, Mr. Hahn said, appearing beside me with an umbrella. The news crew is here. Are you ready for that interview? I looked out at the storm, then back at my beautiful resort. Yes, I said, straightening my shoulders. I'm ready. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't what you do in private, it's what you're willing to stand behind in public. The news report aired that night, and by the next morning, it was trending on Twitter. The video footage from the hotel guests' phones left no room for misinterpretation. It wasn't just the drama that captured people's attention. It was the larger message about how we treat service workers, about dignity in all forms of honest labor, about standing up to bullies regardless of their relationship to you. The response was immediate and overwhelming. My corporate office started fielding interview requests from national media outlets. CNN wanted to do a segment. The Today Show requested a live interview. The Wall Street Journal wanted to write a feature about my business philosophy. But more importantly, the bookings started pouring in. Ma'am, Mr. Han told me over the phone, we're completely booked for the next 3 months. People are specifically asking to stay at the hotel, where the owner stood up for her employees. I was back in Manhattan, sitting in my corner office and watching the story unfold. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. While Leo and Isabel were presumably hiding from the media attention, I was fielding congratulations from business leaders and celebrities. But the most meaningful responses came from people like Catalina. She appeared in my office a few days later. I saw the news, she said. I saw what my brother Javier told the reporters about me, about how you treat your employees. I wanted to thank you. You don't need to thank me for treating you fairly, I said. That's just basic human decency. Maybe to you, Catalina said, her voice getting stronger. But not to everyone. She gave me a small ceramic figurine that her granddaughter had made, with the words, "Thank you for helping my family," written on the base. I felt tears in my eyes. A little girl in Key West now believed that success meant taking care of people, not looking down on them. That afternoon, a different kind of visitor arrived. "Miss Sterling," my assistant said, "there's a Mr. Bradley Morrison here to see you. He says he works for your son-in-law." He was a senior partner at Leo's investment firm. "Miss Sterling," he said, "what happened at your resort was completely unacceptable. We've lost 2 significant accounts since Monday. The partners have met," he continued, "and we've decided that it would be best for everyone if Leo pursued other opportunities. His employment with us is being terminated immediately." So Leo had lost his job. The man who had publicly humiliated me for being just a maid was now unemployed because of his own behavior. The irony was exquisite. After he left, a phone call from my lawyer came. "Ilera," she said, "I have some interesting news about your son-in-law's threats to sue you. They dropped him as a client yesterday. They reviewed the video evidence and advised him that not only does he have no case against you, but pursuing litigation would only draw more negative attention to his behavior." I laughed. "So, he can't even find lawyers willing to take his money?" "Oh, it gets better," my lawyer said. "Most of the major firms in New York won't touch him now. They're afraid of being associated with his reputation." By Friday afternoon, the story had been covered by every major news outlet in the country. The most satisfying moment came when Mr. Han called with the final update of the week. "Ma'am, we just got a group booking from the International Hotel Workers Union. They want to hold their annual convention at Sunset Bay next year. They specifically requested our property because, and I quote, "Sterling Hotels shows that successful businesses can be built on treating workers with respect." That evening, I stood in my penthouse apartment, holding Catalina's granddaughter's ceramic figurine, and thinking about the events of the past week. In trying to humiliate me, Leo and Isabel had inadvertently created a platform for me to demonstrate my values on a national stage. Their cruelty had become my opportunity to show the world what real strength looks like. 3 months later, as autumn painted the Manhattan skyline, I made a decision. I was going to invite Leo and Isabel to dinner. The numbers were extraordinary. The best 3 months in Sterling Hotel's history. The Sunset Bay incident had generated over $50 million in new bookings. But success, I'd learned, means nothing if you have no one to share it with. And despite everything, Isabel was still my daughter. The invitation was formal. "Isabel and Leo, I would be honored if you would join me for dinner at my home on Saturday, October 15th at 7 o'clock. I know our last meeting was difficult, but you're still my family, and family deserves another chance. Please let me know if you can attend. With love and hope, Mother." The response came 2 days later. "Mother, Leo and I would be pleased to accept your invitation." It was a start. I spent the week planning every detail. This was going to be a production. I hired Julian, the same server from Sunset Bay, to work the dinner, and I hired Javier, the taxi driver, who had relocated to New York, to drive them. I selected dishes that required skilled preparation, showcasing the artistry and talent of people who work in service industries. Saturday evening arrived. I dressed in a navy blue cocktail dress. When the elevator opened, Leo and Isabel stepped out, looking like they were walking into a courtroom. "Mother," Isabel said, offering me an air kiss. "Ilera," Leo said, extending his hand. "Thank you for inviting us. Your home is impressive." We made small talk. Then Julian announced that dinner was served. The table was set with my grandmother's fine china. I sat at the head of the table. Julian served the first course, pan-seared scallops. "This looks wonderful," Isabel said. "Julian is quite talented." I agreed. He's actually a culinary school graduate who works at one of my properties in Florida. He's considering opening his own restaurant someday. Leo cut into his scallop without comment. The conversation was neutral until the main course. "Mother," Isabel said, looking at me directly, "we need to talk about what happened in Florida." I agree. We do. "Ilera, I want to apologize for what happened at the resort. I was under a lot of stress. I handled the situation poorly." "Poorly," I repeated. "That's an interesting choice of description." "What Leo means," Isabel interjected, "is that the whole thing got blown out of proportion." "Look," Leo said, "I admit I was out of line. But did you really need to humiliate us in front of all those people? Did I make it into a scene?" I asked. "Or did you?" Isabel reached across the table. "Mother, please. We all said things we regret. Can't we just move past it? We're family." I looked down at her hand. That little girl was gone. "You're right," I said slowly. "We are family, and family should be able to be honest with each other." I stood up and walked to the sideboard. I pressed a button on a remote. A large flat-screen television was revealed behind a painting. Before we move forward, I think it's important that we all remember exactly what happened that day. "Mother," Isabel said quickly, "that's not necessary." "Oh, but I think it is," I said, pressing play. And suddenly, the scene that had changed everything was playing on the wall of my elegant dining room. You could see every expression, hear every word. Chase pointing at me, "She's just a maid." Isabel's delighted laughter. My calm revelation of who I really was. Their shocked faces. The applause from the other guests. I let the entire sequence play. When it ended, the dining room fell completely silent. "Well," I said, "now that we've all refreshed our memories about what actually happened, perhaps we can have an honest conversation about moving forward." The silence that followed the video was tense. Leo was the first to speak. "Ilera, I know how that looks, but you have to understand." "I understand perfectly," I interrupted. "I understand that you called me just a maid. I understand that you instructed my staff not to serve me. I understand that you found my humiliation entertaining enough to share with everyone in that lobby." Isabel shifted in her chair. "Mother, please. We came here tonight to apologize, to try to fix things. Did you?" Because what I heard earlier was Leo calling it a misunderstanding and you describing it as something that got blown out of proportion. Neither of those sounds like an apology to me. I've already lost my job over this whole mess. Isn't that punishment enough? Leo said, "How long are you going to hold one moment of poor judgment against us?" One moment of poor judgment. The man still didn't understand what he'd done wrong. I stood up and walked to the windows overlooking Central Park. "Leo," I said, "do you know why I built this empire? I built it because I remember what it feels like to be invisible, to have people look right through you, because your job doesn't matter to them. Every hotel I own, every employee I hire, every policy I implement is designed to ensure that no one who works for me ever feels the way I felt when I was 19 years old." I turned back to face them. I could see that Isabel was crying silently. That wasn't one moment of poor judgment in my hotel lobby. That was a window into who you really are. That was you showing everyone present, including my daughter, exactly how you view people whose only crime is working in service industries. I walked back to the table. The really heartbreaking part, I continued, isn't even what you said to me. It's what you said to Javier, a good man who was just trying to do his job. You called him an immigrant like it was a dirty word, dismissed his taxi as a piece of junk, and treated him like he was beneath your notice. And through all of it, I said, my daughter sat there and laughed. Isabel's silent tears had become quiet sobs. Mother, I'm sorry. I don't know why I wasn't thinking. You weren't thinking, I agreed. But you were feeling. And what you were feeling was superiority, amusement at watching someone you considered beneath you being put in her place. You were raised by a woman who cleaned toilets, who scrubbed floors, who built everything you've ever enjoyed on the foundation of that work. And you found the very idea of it shameful. Leo suddenly stood up. Enough. I came here tonight to apologize, to try to make peace with you. But if you're going to lecture us like we're children, then maybe we should just leave. Actually, I said, walking to the sideboard and opening a drawer. I think that's an excellent idea. I pulled out a manila folder thick with documents and placed it on the table between them. Before you go, though, there are a few things we need to discuss. Leo looked at the folder suspiciously. What is that? These are the consequences of your actions over the past 3 months. The first document was a letter from Leo's former law firm formally declining to represent him. The second was a credit report showing that several of their credit cards had been canceled. The third was a notice from their exclusive country club informing them that their membership was being reviewed. You did this, he said, looking up at me with hatred in his eyes. You used your connections to destroy us. I didn't destroy anything, I replied. I simply made sure that the right people saw the video of who you really are. What they did with that information was entirely their choice. I pulled out another set of documents. I also took the liberty of calling in some favors. Your business ventures, I explained, have been largely funded by loans that I personally guaranteed. I've called in those guarantees, effective immediately. You can't do that, Leo said. Actually, I can. When I guaranteed those loans, I included clauses that allowed me to call them in if circumstances changed. Your public behavior and the resulting damage to my family's reputation constitute such a change. I also reviewed Isabel's trust fund. Isabel, I said gently, your trust fund is suspended indefinitely. The apartment I bought you has been transferred back to my name. The credit cards I've been paying for are canceled. The car lease I guaranteed has been terminated. She looked up at me with shock. Mother, you can't. We have nothing without those things. How are we supposed to live? The same way millions of other people live, I said, by working for it. Leo slammed his hand down on the table. This is insane. You're destroying your own daughter's life because of your wounded pride. I'm giving my daughter the opportunity to learn what I learned when I was 19 years old. I corrected. That work has dignity. That self-respect comes from earning what you have. I walked back to the sideboard and pulled out another manila folder. This is a job application, I said, placing it in front of Isabel. It's for a housekeeping position at one of my hotels in New Jersey. Entry level, minimum wage plus benefits, with opportunities for advancement based on performance and attitude. Isabel stared at the application like it was a snake that might bite her. You want me to be a maid, she whispered. I want you to be the woman I raised you to be, I said, someone who understands that there's no shame in honest work, and that the measure of a person isn't their bank balance. It's how they treat others. Leo stood up so violently that his chair toppled backward. This is blackmail. This is consequences, I said, my voice ice cold. Something you've apparently never experienced before. Isabel picked up the job application with trembling hands. Mother, please. I'll apologize publicly. I'll do whatever you want, but please don't make me do this. You're asking me to give up everything I am. I'm asking you to discover who you could be, I replied, without trust funds and credit cards and unearned privileges. I'm asking you to find out if there's anything worthwhile underneath all that entitlement. Leo grabbed Isabel's arm. Come on, we're leaving. But Isabel didn't move. She sat there staring at the job application. What if I said yes? She asked quietly. What if I took the job? Would that really change anything between us? I don't know, I admitted, but it would be a start. It would show me that you're willing to learn, to grow, to become someone worthy of respect. And what about Leo? She asked. I looked at Leo and felt nothing but pity. Leo is welcome to find his own path, I said, but he's not welcome in my life, my businesses, or my family. That bridge is burned beyond repair. The silence that followed was broken by the soft sound of Isabel signing her name at the bottom of the job application. Leo stared at her in shock. Isabel, what are you doing? We can't, Isabel said, her voice stronger than I'd heard it all evening. You lost your job, Leo. We're about to lose everything else. And maybe Mother is right. Maybe I need to learn what it means to work for something. She stood up. For the first time in years, she looked directly into my eyes without defiance or resentment. I'll take the job, she said. I'll do whatever it takes to earn your respect back. I felt something crack inside my chest, not breaking, but opening like a door that had been locked for so long. It won't be easy, I warned her. You'll start at the bottom. You'll clean toilets and strip beds and carry heavy loads. Your coworkers will know who you are, and you'll have to prove yourself every single day. I understand, she said. Leo was backing toward the door. Fine, he snarled. But don't expect me to stick around and watch you debase yourself for your mother's amusement. Isabel turned to face him, and I saw something in her expression I hadn't seen since she was a child. Strength. Then don't, she said simply. Don't stick around. Don't wait for me. Don't pretend this marriage was ever about anything more than my trust fund. The words hit Leo like physical blows. You'll regret this, he said finally. Both of you will regret this. The only thing I regret, I said, walking to the front door and opening it for him, is that it took me this long to see who you really are. Leo stormed out, and I closed the door behind him. Isabel and I stood in my foyer, looking at each other across 3 months of pain and anger. She looked smaller somehow, but there was something in her posture that reminded me of the determined little girl who used to insist she could tie her own shoes. I don't know if I can do this, she said quietly. You can, I said. You're my daughter. You're stronger than you know. What if I'm not? What if I fail? Then you'll get back up and try again, I said. That's what we do. That's who we are. A moment later, Julian appeared with her coat. Miss Sterling, he said respectfully, Javier is downstairs whenever you're ready for him to drive you home. Isabel looked confused. I don't have a home anymore. You have a home, I said. It might not be the apartment I bought you, but you have a place to go. I've arranged for a small apartment near the hotel where you'll be working. Nothing fancy, but clean and safe. She nodded, accepting this new reality. As she gathered her things, she paused at the door. Mother, she said, that day at the hotel, I'm not proud of who I was. I want you to know that. I know, I said, and I want you to know that no matter what happened between us, I never stopped loving you. I never stopped hoping you'd find your way back to the person I knew you could be. After she left, I stood alone in my dining room. I thought about Isabel signing that job application, about the look in her eyes when she told Leo not to wait for her, about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, some good could come from all this pain. For the first time in 3 months, I had hope. 6 months later, I received a phone call. That changed everything I thought I knew about redemption. Miss Sterling, said the general manager of our New Jersey property. I need to speak with you about Isabel. Is she in trouble? I asked. No, ma'am. Quite the opposite. I'm calling because she's extraordinary. I have never seen a new employee work as hard as your daughter has over the past 6 months. She shows up early, stays late, volunteers for the worst shifts, and never complains about anything. She started in housekeeping as you requested. The manager continued. Within 2 months, she was training new employees. Within 4 months, she was assistant head of housekeeping. Last week, I promoted her to front desk supervisor. Front desk supervisor. I repeated, genuinely shocked. She earned it, the manager said firmly. She knows every aspect of hotel operations now, from the ground up. But more than that, she treats every guest and every coworker with respect and kindness. The staff adores her. The guests request her specifically when they have problems. She's become everything you always said a sterling manager should be. After I hung up, I sat in my office, thinking about the strange paths life takes us down. 6 months ago, I had watched my daughter walk away from everything she'd ever known, embarking on a journey I'd forced her to take. Now she was apparently thriving in ways I'd never imagined possible. That afternoon, I made an unannounced visit to the New Jersey hotel. I entered through the lobby and immediately saw my daughter behind the front desk. It took me a moment to recognize her. She carried herself with a confidence I'd never seen before. She was helping an elderly businessman with his reservation. I watched as she listened patiently, consulted her computer, and ultimately arranged for him to be upgraded to a suite. "You're a lifesaver," the man said. "My wife is joining me tomorrow for our anniversary, and this room will be perfect." "Congratulations on your anniversary," Isabel said warmly. "We'll make sure housekeeping includes some champagne and chocolates as our gift." After the guest left, I approached the counter. "Mother," she said, seeing me, "I didn't know you were coming. I wanted to see how you were doing." I said, "The manager spoke very highly of you." "She's been wonderful," Isabel said, blushing. "Everyone here has been wonderful, actually." Another guest approached the desk, a young woman with 2 small children who looked tired. Isabel immediately knelt down to the little girl's eye level. "My daughter forgot her favorite stuffed animal at home," the woman said. "Oh no," Isabel said. "What kind of stuffed animal was it?" "A purple elephant named Peanut." "Well," Isabel said seriously, "we can't replace Peanut, but I know where there's a gift shop that might have a friend for Peanut. Someone who can keep your room company until you get home. Would that help?" The little girl nodded eagerly, and Isabel personally escorted them to the gift shop. When she returned, I was still standing at the front desk. "Your daughter is the best supervisor we've ever had," the head of housekeeping said. "She works harder than any of us, and she never asks us to do anything she wouldn't do herself. She stripped beds with us for 2 months, got her hands dirty, learned every job from the bottom up, never once acted like she was too good for the work." I looked at Isabel, who was clearly embarrassed by the praise, but also glowing with pride. "She's earned every promotion," the manager said. "No special treatment, no shortcuts. She's proven herself at every level." "Thank you," I said to the assembled staff. "That means more to me than you know." As the group dispersed, Isabel and I were left alone at the front desk. "How are you really doing?" I asked. "I'm happy," she said, and I could hear the surprise in her own voice. "I wake up every morning knowing that I've earned my place here. I've earned the respect of my coworkers and the trust of my guests. I've never felt that before. And Leo," her expression hardened slightly, "he filed for divorce 3 months ago. Apparently, he found someone else, someone whose trust fund wasn't suspended." "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm not," Isabel said firmly. "He never loved me. He loved what I could provide for him. When that was gone, so was he." She looked down at her hands, hands that showed the signs of honest work. "I'm ashamed of who I was when I was with him, the way I treated people, the way I laughed at your humiliation that day in Key West. I can't believe I ever thought that was acceptable." "We all make mistakes," I said gently. "That wasn't a mistake, Mother. That was who I had become. Entitled, cruel, thoughtless. You did the right thing, cutting me off. It was the only way I was going to learn. It was the hardest thing I've ever done." "I know," she said, "but it worked. Look at me now. I'm proud of my work. I respect the people I work with, and I understand what you've built here. Really understand it for the first time." When a family with teenagers approached the desk, Isabel excused herself to help them. When she returned, she turned back to me. "Mother," she said, "I know I have a long way to go to earn your trust back, but I want you to know that every day I work here, I think about the woman who raised me, the woman who built all this from nothing. I want to be that woman too," she said. "I want to be worthy of the sterling name." I walked around the counter and pulled her into my arms. You already are, I whispered into her hair. You already are. 6 months later, I stood in the ballroom of our flagship Manhattan hotel, looking out at an audience of hospitality industry leaders. At the podium stood Isabel, now the general manager of our New Jersey property, delivering a keynote address on servant leadership and the dignity of work. 18 months ago, she was saying, I was a person who had never worked a day in her life. I looked down on service workers. My mother forced me to confront who I had become by taking away everything I hadn't earned. She gave me a choice: continue being the entitled person I'd become, or learn what it means to work for respect instead of inheriting it. She looked directly at me in the audience and smiled. It was the greatest gift anyone has ever given me, because through that work, through cleaning toilets and stripping beds and learning every job from the ground up, I discovered something I'd never had before: self-respect. The knowledge that I had earned my place in the world through my own efforts. The applause was thunderous. After the conference, Isabel and I walked through Central Park. Do you ever regret it? I asked, giving up the trust fund, the apartment, all that comfort. Every morning when I wake up, she said, finally, I know that everything I have, my job, my apartment, my respect for my coworkers, I earned it myself. I've never felt that before. It's better than any trust fund could ever be. She turned to look at me, and in her eyes, I saw the woman I'd always hoped she could become. You gave me something more valuable than money, Mother. You gave me the chance to discover who I really am underneath all that privilege. And it turns out I actually like that person. As we walked back toward my building, she slipped her arm through mine. Thank you, she said, for everything, for not giving up on me, even when I'd given up on myself. I never gave up on you, I said. I just had to help you find your way back to yourself. That night, as I stood in my penthouse, looking out at the city lights, I thought about the strange journey that had brought us to this place. What had started as the worst day of my life, the day my daughter laughed at my humiliation, had ultimately become the catalyst for something beautiful. Her transformation from entitled heiress to respected professional. I had heard that Leo was struggling. His new relationship had ended badly. His reputation in business circles remained toxic. He burned too many bridges, offended too many people, and never learned the fundamental lesson that actions have consequences. But that was his story to live with. Mine was about second chances, about the power of honest work to transform a person's character, and about the unbreakable bond between a mother and daughter who had finally found their way back to each other. Some people never get the chance to redeem themselves. But sometimes, if you're very lucky and very determined and willing to do the hard work of becoming better than you were, sometimes you get to write a different ending to your story. Isabel had written hers with calloused hands and early mornings, with patience and humility. She had learned what I learned 39 years ago in that Boston hotel, that there is profound dignity in work well done. And now, as I watched the lights of my empire sparkle across the city, I knew that when the time came to pass on what I built, it would go to someone who truly understood its value. Not just the profits and properties, but the principles that made it all worthwhile. My daughter had finally come home, not to wealth and privilege, but to something infinitely more valuable, the knowledge that she had earned her place in the world through her own merit. In the end, that was the only inheritance that really mattered.